Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So
Wait.
today, today I'm going to talk about. Today I'll be presenting a set of family of locking protocols that use a new technique called shuffling. As we all know that locks are the basic building blocks for today's applications, and they really impact the performance. For instance, take a look at this graph. So what is happening is that this shows a typical performance graph on any of the many-core machines. For example, here the machine has 8 socket and 192 cores. So what we can see is that the throughput varies with increasing thread count. Although application developers expect that their application will exhibit linear scalability with increasing core count, unfortunately, this is far from reality. Moreover, future hardware will further exacerbate this issue as we can have thousands of hardware threads in a single machine and up to multiples of socket. Right now, we can have up to 32 sockets in a single machine. Since the hardware is already changing and the applications are already using locks for correctness, there are two goals that lock designers want to achieve. Let's try to think it from the perspective of application. So today, applications try to use threads to utilize number of cores, and then they use threads to improve their performance. Thus, if there is a contention on the lock, then the lock should try to provide higher throughput while minimizing its contention. Now, there are two extreme cases, single thread and oversubscription. It can happen that applications might have multiples of phases, and at that point of time, what can happen is that an application might be using only one thread to do the operation. At this point of time, the lock should not have any penalty. Then there is another scenario, which is called oversubscription, in which applications usually run more number of threads than the number of cores, which is a very common scenario if you're taking operating systems or databases for I/O or page weight. In that case, the lock should avoid the bookkeeping overhead that comes from the scheduler. Then the last but the most important aspect is the footprint. Most of the lock should have the least memory footprint. The reason is that these locks are embedded in data structures that can be in millions. One very classic example is file inodes. Let's deep dive into how current locks are actually performing that are being used in practice. So here I'm referring stock version as the Linux mutex or the writer part of the reader-writer semaphore in the Linux kernel. So what the benchmark that we are running here is each thread creates a file in a shared directory, writes some data to it, and closes the file. Please keep in mind that the file creation operation is serialized by the shared directory. So the graph represents on the x-axis is the number of threads, and on the y-axis we have operations per second, which are in millions. And since this is an 8-socket machine, there are 24 threads, 24 cores on one socket. What we can see here is that the performance crashes after crossing the socket boundary. And the reason is because of the non-uniform memory access, or so-called NUMA, in which accessing the local socket memory is 2 to 3 times faster than accessing the remote socket memory. Now, if we take the case of oversubscribed scenario, in which we have 2x oversubscription, means 384 threads, what happens is that NUMA is still affecting the performance. So can we prevent such throughput crash after crossing the socket boundary? Well, there have been a lot of existing research efforts that try to make the lock NUMA aware by having 2 sets of lock, a per socket lock and global lock. And these locks are generally hierarchical in nature. But there are 2 big issues with those lock designs. The first is that they require extra memory allocation, and they do not really care about the single thread performance. For the performance sake, we are going to take CST as an example, which is one of the state-of-the-art algorithms that tries to minimize a bit of the memory allocation overhead and also supports core oversubscription. Now, if you see here, the yellow line, CST is actually maintaining the throughput at higher thread count, as well as in the case of oversubscribed scenario, that is 384 threads. But it has a poor single thread performance. And this happens because of the multiple atomic instruction that needs to be done while acquiring the lock, because it has to acquire per socket lock and the global lock and then release them. This is a big issue for applications that are using single thread or even for the non-contented scenarios. Now here I also present the memory footprint of the locks at 192 threads. So what we can see here is that CST has almost 9x overhead compared to the stock version, and this benchmark has 32 GB of memory footprint. And this is not even the case. If you look at the hierarchical locks, we can have up to a gigabyte of memory allocation just for doing this benchmark. This is a big deterrent to their adoption in any of the complicated applications. So there are two goals of this work. The first one is, can we design a NUMA-aware lock which does not suffer from the memory overhead and can maintain the throughput regardless of the thread contention? To do that, we have a very simple idea. What if we could sort the waiters on the fly? This idea comes from two simple observations. The first one is, most of the hierarchical locks that have been designed, the way they try to solve the NUMA overhead is that they try to pass the lock within the same socket ID. And if you look at even prior works which are based on the queue locks, they are already maintaining a list of waiters. What if we could just shuffle them? Let me show you an example. So here I have a waiting queue, and thread T1 is the head of the queue, which is from socket 0. Now, T2 from socket 3 also joins, and simultaneously, T3 and T4 also joins. Here, T1 and T3 are from the same socket ID, which is 0. Now, what if T1 could traverse the list and move T3 to nearby itself? Well, this whole idea of reordering the queue is what we call shuffling, in which a waiter which was otherwise spinning or wasting the CPU cycle is now trying to amortize the cost of lock operations, either by reordering the queue, in this case it was NUMA awareness, or by modifying the waiter state, either by waking them up or letting them sleep. I would like to emphasize that Shuffler is actually computing the NUMA-ness on the fly without using any extra memory, unlike the hierarchical locks. Well, if we take a step back and think about the shuffling ideology or the methodology, the idea is pretty generic in the sense that now a lock designer can take this idea of a shuffler and can modify the queue or its waiter state with a defined policy or function. So here we can say one policy is NUMA awareness, which we have already covered. The other two policies which I'm going to talk about can be, what if I could wake up the sleeping waiters that once I have shuffled them for designing blocking lock, or grouping the writers together to design writer-preferred reader-writer lock. The question becomes is, how can we incorporate this idea in the lock design? With that, we propose shuffle locks. Shuffle locks are the minimal footprint locks that try to handle any thread contention. Shuffle lock is a combination of a test and set lock of 4 bytes and a queue tail of 8 bytes. So by decoupling this, what happens is that the lock holder always tries to hold the test and set lock, meanwhile waiters are joining the queue. The way the lock and unlock operation works is as follows. In the case of lock operation, a thread will first try to acquire the test and set lock. If it succeeds, it enters the critical section and is also the lock holder. Otherwise, it joins the queue. In the case of unlock operation, the lock holder resets the test and set word to 0. Well, by segregating the test and set lock from the queue tail, what happens is that test and set lock actually maintains the single thread performance which is required for the non-contented scenarios. And now we can use the waiters for the shuffling to improve the application throughput, such as NUMA awareness or implementing blocking lock. I would like to emphasize that since we are using waiters which have been idle or have been wasting CPU cycles, are now doing the job for us. So what it means is that shuffling is mostly off the critical path. Well, there's a chance that we may lose the fairness which we try to avoid by bounding the number of shuffling rounds, which is a similar idea to that of the hierarchical locks. Let's see an example of how it is working. So here are the 4 stages. I will talk about how the lock and the unlock operation will work. So initially, the shuffle lock is unlocked, nothing is there, and T0 wants to acquire the lock, which it will succeed after the successful compare and swap operation and will become the lock holder. Now suppose multiple threads have joined the queue from T1 to T4, as shown earlier. And at this point of time, T1, which is at the head of the queue, will start the shuffling process. And it will go ahead and will find that T3 was from this different socket ID, which it will group together, and then further traverse again and will find that nothing is there. And at this point of time, it will try assign T3 as the new shuffler, which will do the same process again. In the case of unlock operation, what happens is that T0 will first reset the test and set word to 0, and then at this point of time, T1 being the head of the queue will try to acquire the lock using the compare and swap operation. On succeeding, it will then notify T3 that now it is the lock, new queue head, and it should start spinning on the test and set lock. And then T1 will deallocate itself from the stack, and this is how the final queue will look like. In terms of implementation, we have replaced all the mutex and read-write semaphores in the Linux kernel, as well as modified the slow path of the queue spin lock. In the user space, we have added our code to the Little library, which is a library for transparent interposition of mutex locks. We have further implemented two locks, blocking lock and reader-writer lock. In the case of blocking lock, what we have done is we have actually augmented we enforce two policies. The first one is the NUMA awareness, and the other one is the waking up of the nearby shuffled waiters based on the NUMA policy. The other one is the reader-writer lock, in which what we have done is we have added the centralized reader-writer counter on top of the shuffle lock, and further incorporated a new policy of batching the writers together. Please see our paper for more details of how we have done these, and as well as the pseudocode and more optimizations which I haven't talked here. In terms of evaluation, I would like to answer two questions. The first one is, does shuffling maintain the application throughput? And then what is the overall memory footprint? Here the setup remains the same of 192 core and 8 socket. So I bring back the previous graph here again, and I'll show the performance of shuffle lock in red color. What we can see here is that shuffle lock is actually maintaining the performance even after crossing the socket boundary, which happens because of the NUMA aware shuffling. Meanwhile, if you look at the oversubscribed case, it still maintains the performance, and there are two particular reasons. The first one is it is actually using the NUMA aware shuffling, as well as waking up the shuffled waiters if they're asleep. There is also one more optimization that we have done of lock stealing, which might be required at some point of time. In the case of single thread performance, what we can see is that because of using of the test and set lock, it maintains the same throughput as the stock version. Now, if we look at the memory footprint, what we can see is that shuffle lock has the least memory footprint in comparison to CST or even stock version. It's almost more than an order of magnitude better, and if we compare against any naive hierarchical locks, it is almost 2 orders of magnitude better. And the reason lies is that we never use any auxiliary data structure. For instance, in the case of stock, what is happening is that we have to use a separate parking list structure and an extra lock for the optimization. Meanwhile, CST requires per socket structure. Because of this, the stock size is around 40 bytes. Meanwhile, CST becomes around 256 bytes, whereas we are merely using 12 bytes for the whole representation. I have also included a mail server, which is an EXIM. It's a fork-intensive benchmark and heavily stresses the memory subsystem, file system, and the scheduler. What we can see here is that shuffle locks improves the throughput by up to 1.5x at higher thread count, and has a least memory footprint, and it decreases it by up to 93%. And the reason is because it has better performance compared to the stock is because it is maintaining the NUMA awareness. Meanwhile, it is not overexerting the memory allocator, which is happening in the case of CST lock. In summary, current lock designs actually suffer from two problems. The first is that they do not maintain the throughput with varying thread contentions, and they also suffer from very high memory footprint in the cases when they want to ensure throughput at higher thread count. To address these concerns, we propose a new methodology called shuffling, which tries to either reorder the list or modify the waiter state on the fly. And it tries to enforce policies such as NUMA awareness, waking up of waiters, etc. By using shuffling, we design a family of locking protocols called shuffle locks that are not only NUMA-aware, but also have the least memory footprint. These are the first family of lock algorithms that use waiters to amortize the cost of the lock operations. Thank you for listening to me, and with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Mike Wellfish, NYU. This is like really cool, very creative. I had what happens when you sort of alluded to this with the word mostly, but what happens when the thread that's currently in the critical section leaves, wakes up a thread that's actually in the middle of doing a shuffle? You know, in the two evaluation graphs that you presented, this doesn't seem to be an issue, but it's hard to tell whether that would always be the case. So I was wondering if you could address that.
So let me repeat the question. So you were asking that what if there is when the lock holder is about to release the lock, and the shuffler is actually waking up the some waiters, right? Then
Yeah, that the one that's being woken up is in the middle of doing a shuffle, so it can't immediately grab the lock, as would otherwise be the case.
So that's true. So what happens is, like, as I mentioned, that we can avoid those situations of so there can be a latency aspect, but we try to avoid those aspects by having an optimization of lock stealing. So if a waiter is coming and if it succeeds, it can take the lock. So we allow to that certain extent. And it plays pretty well in the sense because hardware also cheats with us in the sense that hardware will try to always prioritize on the local socket when you're trying to acquire the lock. So it somehow helps us in that scenario.
Okay. Go ahead.
Tom Ping from UMass. So I have a question about how did you decide the socket of a lock?
You can always decide the socket of the lock either using if you're in the user space, you can use the RDT SCP to get the core ID, and from there you can infer it. Or in the kernel space, there are already APIs are provided to do that.
So you basically based on the address of the lock or based on the thread ID?
Yes. Thread ID, I would not say here. So if we are running applications in the user space, we have decided which core ID they are coming from, which core they are running, if we are doing some sort of pinning. So the experiments that I showed you, at least the micro benchmark is pinned, but not the other one. So we are not allowing, we just get the information from the API that is provided by the kernel, which already does that, at least in the kernel space.
Okay, so I have another question. So what's the major reason why the memory footprint is reduced?
Because we are using the waiters to do the job for us. I mean, if you look at the hierarchical lock, what they were doing is the construction was you have a per socket lock and then you have a global lock. So the threads will actually enter first try to acquire their per socket lock. So they have the notion of a socket ID. So what is happening is you have this socket ID information already.
Okay.
Meanwhile, in our case, we are just trying to sort the list in such a way that you pass the lock in the same socket ID.
Okay, thank you.
Yao from Twitter. My question is, to provide fairness, you say you want to bond the number of shuffling. Yes. Have you experimented with different values, and how did you decide, and how does it look like?
So we didn't play with a lot of values. So usually, the value of 1,000 usually works, or we can always use a random generator for these kind of things. I mean, it's just mostly about the throughput aspect, so we never care about what is happening. Usually what the values that we have played is around more than 1,000. Around 1,000, it works fine. Below 1,000, we can have a bit of a problem, not as good as throughput as we are expecting. So we keep like that.
Have you tried to observe latencies?
We have never cared about the latency aspect here.
Thank you. This concludes the last talk, and I forgot to mention Sanidhya is on the market. So let's thank him again.